Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Over the last few months, I've been getting quite a lot of people coming into my shop who seem very unsure on how to actually work out what size rodent they should be feeding to their pet snake. So in today's video, I would like to tackle this and try to help some people out and help you work out what size rodent you should feed to your pet snake. So hopefully by the end of this video, you will feel a lot more confident about what size rodent that you're feeding to your pet snakes, but also you'll feel a lot more confident that what you're feeding to your snake is going to be a good solid meal for them. Now, to begin with, I understand that if you're new to keeping snakes, working this out can be quite overwhelming, as well as a little bit confusing on how to do this, and I totally appreciate this. However, it's really not as hard as you might think, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. So if you are struggling to work out what size rodent you should feed to your pet snake, then stay tuned to find out. Okay, so to start with, everyone does this slightly different, and in all honesty, there's no right or wrong way. And ultimately, the main objective when you're actually feeding your pet snake is to ultimately leave a small lump in their stomach once they've eaten. Now, please keep in mind that you don't want to feed a rodent which is considerably way too large for your pet snake, because if the rodent is way too big for your snake, it's going to become very difficult for your pet snake to actually digest it. But on top of this, it can be uncomfortable for your snake to have this too big of a rodent sat inside their stomach. But the main risk when feeding a prey item that's way too big for your snake is you may find that your snake regurgitates that prey item, which obviously we don't really want. Ideally, we want them to be able to keep that meal down and not bring it back up. But when they regurgitate a rodent, this could also bring up stomach acids, which could basically start burning your snake's digestive tract. Another problem with regurgitation is you would need to allow your snake time after it's regurgitated in order to actually rest and also recover from regurgitation. And this is because when they regurgitate, it could scratch their throat or leave some kind of scar. And obviously your snake's going to need to be able to recover from this before you actually offer another meal. So if in doubt, always go slightly smaller. If you're actually concerned on whether you're feeding too big of a prey item, it's always better to go slightly smaller rather than going too big. Obviously, if your snake does regurgitate, then that's usually a good indicator that the prey item was a bit too big for them. So if this does happen to you, I'd definitely recommend just going down a size. And usually by going down one size, you may find that your snake won't regurgitate that one. So this is definitely something worth keeping in mind. But like I say, if in doubt, always go slightly smaller, just in case, to be on the safe side. Okay, so now that we've covered that one, let's now move on. Now, there are basically two ways that I like to recommend to people on how to actually work out what size rodent they should be feeding to their pet snakes. So the first way is basically where you feed a rodent which is a similar size or slightly bigger than the biggest part of your snake's body. Now, obviously, this is going to vary depending on each species, but for example, if you take a look at this snake and also look at this rodent and then simply put the rodent next to the biggest part of your snake's body, and as you can see, this rodent is a similar size in diameter. Like I say, if it's slightly wider, it's not going to be detrimental. It doesn't have to be exactly the size of your snake. Like I said, it can be slightly larger. It can also be slightly smaller. But a good judgment is a similar size to the thickest part of your snake. So that's the first way that I like to recommend to people in order for them to actually work out what size rodent they should be feeding to their pet snake. Now, I find that for those who are beginners and have never kept a pet snake before, this specific way can be a little bit overwhelming because it kind of feels like you're just guessing. And when you're a beginner, you want a more exact sort of way of doing things, so then you feel a lot more comfortable and confident in what you're actually feeding to them. So personally, I find that this way isn't the best way for those who are beginners, but I definitely find that a lot more experienced keepers are certainly using this method, and it does work. I too have used this method. I feel like this way is the reason why a lot of beginners get overwhelmed, and I can also understand why beginners can get quite confused with this, because it does come across as if you're just guessing rather than working something out properly. So if you feel like that this way isn't the best way for you, or it's too confusing for for you, then personally I'd recommend trying the next way, which I'm going to go over in a second. So in order to do this next method, you're going to need to first of all weigh your snake. And then once you've weighed your snake and you know how much your snake actually weighs, you can then work out 10 to 15% of your snake's weight. Now, by working out 10 to 15% of your snake's body weight, you can then work out what weight your rodent should be for feeding to your pet snake. So let's actually go through an example of this so then you can actually see this and have a better idea on how to actually work this one out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this lovely banana python, and all I'm basically going to do is turn on the scales and then simply place the python into this container so we can actually weigh it. So as you can see, the snake is weighing 1,273 grams. So now let's actually work out 10% of that. So if we put it in, times it by 10%, which is 127.30 grams. So that's 10%. Now let's work out 15%. So we're going to put the weight of the snake in again, times it by 15%, which is 190.95 grams, which means that our snake's rodent should be between 127 grams and 190 grams. So anywhere within this range will likely be perfectly fine for the snake. So that's an example for you. So hopefully you'll be able to copy this sort of method and hopefully work out what weight of a rodent that you should be feeding to your snake. But I'm going to give you another example just so you can see the process again, and then hopefully you will be able to give this a go at home. So here we have another python. This one's a bit smaller, so we're just going to put him into the container. And as you can see, he weighs a total of 621 grams. So now let's work out 10% of that. So we've put it in times 10%, which is 62.1 grams. So now what I'm going to do is work out 15%. So we're going to put it in again, times 15% is 93.15 grams, which means the weight of our rodent should be between 62 to 93 grams. So now let's take a look at this chart. This is just a chart that I've got in the shop with the weights of all of the rodents. So if we're looking for a rodent that's between 62 and 93 grams, this would mean that our snake would be feeding on the large wiener rat size, which is between 51 and 100 grams. So yeah, like I say, this would be a good estimate for what weight your rodent should be, which would give you a good estimate on what size rodent to feed to your pet snake. Now, for example, let's say your snake weighed 200 grams, just for example's sake. 10 to 15% of that is going to be 20 to 30 grams. So let's say you're feeding a 30-gram food item. You could either feed one prey item at 30 grams, or you could also feed two smaller prey items at 15 grams each. Either way, it's going to be fine. Honestly, it's sometimes good to actually switch it up and sometimes offer them the two and then sometimes just offer them the one larger one. Like I say, there's no right or wrong. And like I say, it can be good for them to actually switch this up. Now, once your snake does actually eat its food, I'd recommend leaving them alone to fully digest over several days. Snakes actually digest a lot slower, so it will take them several days to actually digest their meals properly. So I definitely recommend just leaving them be, let them digest before trying to handle them again. So if you are a beginner and have never tried working out what size rodent to feed to your pet snake, then I'd certainly recommend starting with this method over the first one. So yeah, I hope that that has been helpful to some people, and I hope you have a better understanding and idea on how to actually go about working out what size rodent to feed to your pet snake. Obviously, any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop us a comment. If you did find this video helpful, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Just simply type in @CoopsReptiles. Also, let us know in the comments if you have other methods that you guys use, because I'm sure beginners will probably be looking for other alternative ways, and I know that these two methods aren't the only methods. So feel free to drop your method into the comment section below, because I'm sure beginners would like to read them and give them a go too. Yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and thanks a lot for watching. And yeah, I suppose I shall see you in my next video. See ya!